Broadcast is live now.
We're live. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Patti Ashley here in outside of Boulder, Colorado, and I'm so excited. It's my first Shameless Facebook Friday Live that I've done since December. I was doing a lot of them during the pandemic and just really trying to open up these conversations with people in that do work in the world related to shame, because it's the word shame itself can be shaming, and what is shame, and are people, and I've written a book and I do trainings for therapists, and I'm just so interested in how people overcome shame and what the experience of shame is for everybody. So thanks for joining us today. I hope this stream is working correctly. Let us know you're here over in the comment section. And I want to introduce my guest today. She is a award-winning author. She's an art therapist and a coach in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And her latest book, Seduced into Darkness, is amazing. And I'm happy to have this conversation with her today. Carrie Ishee.
Yeah, so happy to be here. We have some good things to talk about.
Yeah. So I read Carrie's book. I was saying that I read very slowly, and I digested this book over time. Hi, Sherry.
Sherry.
And I was really impressed with your writing style and just the way you engaged me in the story. And I felt like I was with you along the way. And so you start off with, being in college, and you go through the whole story up until present time and your experience of that. So what compelled you to write your story, and why now?
Well, I have been in the process of writing it for many decades, and started back in my 20s, just after my court cases had resolved, just getting some feelings down on paper. But it was just, I was too raw. It would have not been a book people would have wanted to read, because I was in so much pain and I really needed to heal. And left the field for a while. I had been in a doctoral program in psychology when I sort of fell apart. I can tell you a little bit more of the background there, but left the field because I just didn't think I could be a good therapist after what I had experienced. I was too reactive. I didn't know if I believed in therapy. And but I slowly got called back in from, I became an interior decorator and a singer. And before I knew it, though, people kept telling me their life stories instead of really me focusing on those other things. And I was like, I really have a call to do this, and I love the work. And it's part of, I think, what was part of the context of how I got drawn in by this doctor who was unethical in his containment of boundaries, because I loved the work. I loved the inner journey, and was vulnerable to a seduction.
So we don't, spoiler alert, I don't want to give the whole book away. I want people to certainly buy it and read it. And like I said, I felt like I was so present with you as you're telling your story. And you were, at what age were you when you started working with, what was his name, Dr. Tony?
I call him Dr. Anthony Romano. That is a pseudonym, because, or I changed his name mainly to protect his family, and it really wasn't about any retaliation. It was really just about getting the story out there, and I don't think he's alive anymore anyway. So, yeah.
So you were how old?
I was 21. I had just entered was just going into my senior year of college. And the summer before, I was having these immune system symptoms, like I was having foggy brain and stuffy nose. I was really tired. And very soon after that, I started having panic attacks and depression. And all of this was happening as I was just about to launch into the world. It was 1980. Women were just really beginning to enter the professions, in mass, before it was more the unusual and it wasn't necessarily a career, right? So I felt this kind of this struggle of the times about becoming an independent woman and doing something in the world. I had thought about medical school. I thought about speech therapy. I thought about becoming a therapist. And I just really, I just had an immune system breakdown and then an emotional breakdown, essentially. And my folks said, I went to see a doctor down in Virginia. I was at Virginia Tech, and the doctor wanted me to put me on meds. And they're like, "Don't do that. Come home. Let's get you some evaluations, and we'll get you straight." Because I had never had symptoms before. I mean, other than your, normal adolescent anxiety and esteem issues at times, I had never had anything like a mental health crisis. So it was new territory.
Yeah.
And so I arrive in his office, the third doctor I had seen, and he was not too far from where my parents lived. He seemed like Ivy League educated. He seemed like a good choice, and started the process.
And that's what got me, because the way you write the story, you're telling it almost like you're in that time. And I could definitely relate to how you felt, how you built a sense of trust with this man. And that was the scary part, because I kept waiting for, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? But you were describing this therapeutic relationship very similar to, ones that I'm familiar with,
Right.
how you establish trust with your patient. And
Right.
then he just started, it just
Right.
got weird. So,
Yeah. He
uh,
had an agenda going that was not informed consent. Let me put it that way. And I don't know exactly when he started consciously crossing boundaries. Like, I don't really understand his awareness as, later on when I went through court proceedings and then got to hear a little bit more about what was going on. I think he really bought his own lie. I think he was really very needy and very off balance himself, and really just rationalized and bought his own
yeah,
story, why this was okay and this was special.
yeah,
And and I was living by that time with the secret that I felt like if I told anybody, he would get in trouble. How would I start with a new therapist? And I was 21. I was like, will insurance even pay if I switch therapists? I mean, I was just a baby, really just, in this world of trusting him. And he was pathologizing so much of my experience, really shaming me for my sexual innocence, shaming me for my naivete, and make me feel worse at the same time that he was like kind of inviting me into this new world of liberation. And it just was really, really distorted.
yeah. And the shame led you to some suicide attempts, right? Because once you were working on your was it a master's program?
Yeah, the doctoral program. Yeah.
And the course was in transference, right? And maybe you want to, people who don't know what transference is, explain
Yeah.
to our listeners what that means. And when you were taking this course, it really hit you hard.
Right.
So what you want to explain transference?
Yeah, and just to kind of do a little bridge in terms of how I got there to this doctoral program was when I was in therapy with him for 4 or 5 months. I said, "Wow, I kind of think I want to do what you do. Therapy seems really cool, looking at your inner world, making room for your emotions." This was all like, bread for my soul, because I came from a family that was very traditional and they loved us, but there wasn't a lot of talk about inner processes. So he immediately jumped on that, and he's like, "I will pay for your education. My corporation will pay for you if you go to school and come back and work for me." So, there was this whole piece about coming back and working for him and getting on this path of becoming a therapist. So eventually I did go to a doctoral program. And yeah, I was sitting in an ethics class, and it was a nice ethics class, professional boundaries, in the first year of doctoral program. And they started talking about transference, and they started talking about what are the major no-nos and how do you keep boundaries. And I was just sitting there, really wanting to get out of this relationship with him, but so dependent and so manipulated. I wasn't even sure what was real.
Right,
The
right.
same time that I'm in this grueling program, you know what getting a doctorate is. It's grueling, right? And it's all about self-reflection. And meanwhile, I have this huge secret that I didn't feel like I could begin to share without it all blowing up. And quite frankly, it was like that. It was like Pandora's box. Once the box was opened, everything came out. And then my sense of self was so disrupted. And I had this narrative that I was in therapy for 3.5 years and it didn't do me any good. I don't know if I believe in therapy, and a very impulsive desire to end my life.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that shame and that secret and that heaviness and the real conditioning that I had heard from him about taking on that I was sick. When I ended it, I was like, I'm going to go crazy if I stay with him. You know, he twisted it around like, make sure you tell the truth to your next therapist. And you're so inappropriate with men. And this, because I looked at some other guy. I mean, he was completely, it was like a domestic abuser from the standpoint, you don't have a relationship with other men. You know, that was the rule in a sense, which I didn't see going into it. It just became that way over time. He really, I describe it, I put it in the context of the Persephone myth, who is the young maiden who gets abducted by Hades, her uncle, dragged into the underworld, held captive, made her his queen. Um, and you know, Persephone is down in the underworld in a world that she does not know. And that's how I experienced it. It was like an inverted universe where good was bad and bad was good. And it was very, very confusing. And and anyway, Persephone eventually comes out, is rescued, and she becomes the goddess of springtime and queen of the underworld. So she can guide lost souls through Hades. And that was an archetype that really spoke to me, to put my story in a context, to understand really the degree to which I had been ruptured, abducted, really.
Yeah.
It was a psychological abduction.
And that's what happens, that's what sociopaths do, right? They look so good at first, and they just, it's like they cast a spell. And so, I mean, I just again could feel that in the story of how you were just like you said, I don't know what's good or
Oh,
what's right or what's wrong, and this is so confusing. And then the Persephone myth, yeah, the archetype of that is, my understanding of Persephone though is when she does come back, it's 'cause I took it usually because I worked with moms so much, the Demeter myth, the Demeter grief of losing her daughter,
right.
and how there's now seasons because we have to embrace the darkness. We have to see the
Yes.
shadow, though it can't be all summer and spring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we get better at navigating darkness. We get better at navigating grief the more we have developed eyes in the dark in a sense and known how to work with it and massage it. And that's, you know, ultimately then I did become a therapist years later. And because I went through it, I think I'm a better, more, I'm able to hold things in a much deeper, richer way without being threatened because I went through that descent. So when we can all go through that, any of us can have a Persephone story at any time, right? Where we get seized by something and our world doesn't make sense. And yet what we do with it matters.
Right, and a lot of people don't come back. I mean, from the underworld. I mean, and that's the scary part. Like, you could have died. You didn't want to live anymore. That's how bad it was. And I think people realize that we can I don't know what's the word, like um
Transform.
transformation,
Um,
and then we have purpose in our pain, and we're able to give back. Studies of resiliency show that the most resilient people are ones who give back, and that's what you're doing now in your work. And
yeah,
and the empathy. I mean, that's the antidote to shame is empathy. And so
absolutely.
really have empathy. And I don't know how many people walk through my door that have had some sort of
Oh,
abuse of power or sexual, assault. I mean, it's unfortunately way too common, and you wouldn't think that it would happen with a therapist because those are the people that we want to trust. What is the
absolutely.
percentage? Do you know the percentage of
You know, that's a great question that, you know, there's different studies throughout time that look at this. I recall one a number of years back when I was really looking at this, that it was somewhere between 7 to 15% of psychologists self-reported that they had either a boundary violation themselves or they knew of someone in close contact who had violated the sexual boundary. Dr. Peter Rutter, who actually endorsed my book, wrote a book years ago called Sex in the Forbidden Zone. And he was an MD psychiatrist who describes the moment where he could have really gotten pulled in and crossed the boundaries based out of his own desire to help, but in a sexualized way. And he's very honest about it. It's an amazing book, Sex in the Forbidden Zone. And he was one of the first that was really looking at also how therapists really need to be really vigilant and supported. And we know this can be a very isolating, very heavy profession. And so, how do we stay well? And then also, there's some research that suggests it's not the newbies that are doing this, that are crossing boundaries. It's people later in life very established. They may get a little bit complacent in terms of boundaries. They've got this down and they're not being vigilant about, am I really serving the client? And then you have your predatory therapists as well that go into it because they know they're going to be working with vulnerable folks. That's very much a small minority is what's suggested by the research.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, let's go back and can you explain transference?
I meant to circle back. Yeah. Well, so transference is, and I believe at first, I think Freud was the first one who talked about transference. But basically, when you're doing really deep psychological, insight-oriented psychodynamic therapy, and you're in that very vulnerable place of the relationship, the client, particularly when they're really in a deep healing place, right, where they're really using this relationship to heal, they can begin to transfer feelings that they could have had for a parent, either something they got from their parent or they didn't get from their parent. So in other words, if they had a neglectful parent, they could transfer that onto the therapist, who maybe in that moment actually is not being neglectful, but working with that energy and what's coming up and bringing it back to the client to identify, what are those feelings and what's getting pulled up. That's the job of the therapist. It's not the job of the therapist to say, oh, I'm in love with you too, and we should start seeing each other, right? I mean, that's like
Right.
crazy.
And then there's the transference of actually being attracted to our therapist because they're giving us that unconditional positive regard, and so something gets activated in us as a client, and then vice versa. So I think that's what we call countertransference, right? So therapist, we have to really be in check with our emotional selves, like you said, really have done our own work so that, say, what if we're attracted to a client, like in your case, Tony was attracted to you?
Right.
What do you do with that information in the therapeutic setting? And how do you set those boundaries? Knowing that, it can happen.
Right.
It's not like something that never ever happens. I mean, we're all human and we're in relationships. Therapy is a relationship. And so
And it's a very intimate relationship. Now, granted, it really is one way. The therapist is not supposed to be using that vehicle for their own intimacy needs, but we clearly as therapists get some needs met in terms of being present, in terms of working with people in a really genuine, heartful capacity. That is riveting. It's part of why it can keep us doing this work when it's so hard sometimes. But when you're the client, for me at 21, never having been in therapy before, to have someone listen so deeply to my inner world and make all sorts of room for what am I feeling, what am I thinking, looking at family dynamics. It was almost like the first time, if you're a marine biologist, and this the first time you take a deep dive in the ocean, right? It's like, oh, there's this whole world. So it was captivating. And then I was also in a spiritual crisis because I was from a very Catholic family. And at 21 is often when there's existential crises that go on, right? You're really starting to leave childhood even more, because I think college can be extended adolescent, right? And like, who am I in the world? Does God intervene? So I was trying to navigate my spiritual questions with the psychological realm. And that's kind of how he started, not kind of, that's how he started crossing boundaries by, you're telling me these stories. Why don't we go back to the church and we can reenact what had happened that day you went with your parents? And so he started normalizing that we were going to take these therapeutic visits outside of the office so I could understand myself better. But this was so much about his need to be more in my life, his need to normalize boundary violations, really.
right,
So
right.
so yeah,
And
yeah,
so, yeah, as a client being in a vulnerable space like that, and like you said, at that age where you're really curious and you want to take stuff in, and he did groom you so well that it was hard to sort out, the poppy seed from the dirt. Um,
yeah. And I did try to set a boundary at one point in time, and this was so interesting. And Patti, I know from your research and your therapeutic um, uh, just holding of clients and healing shame. It's like how visceral and um, how visceral and how somatic the experience is in terms of empowerment and violation. And what happened to me is at one point in time, I was in the office with him, and I just said, there, I just feel like there's this wall here, like I can't go any deeper. There's this wall, and I could literally feel this energy around me, which now I know is a boundary. I had never identified that before, but I'm describing it, right? And I said, and he goes, well, what is it? And I said, well, I'm afraid I'm falling in love with you. And then I was surprised, because in reality, I was afraid he was falling in love with me. I wasn't sure what I was feeling. I knew I loved him, right? But I wasn't sexually attracted to him. And he just jumped on that. And he said, have you ever stopped to think that maybe I'm in love with you too? This is great. We can start planning. I want to take you to the opera. I mean, he had this whole thing planned out that now he's going to pitch to me. Oh, I lost you, Patti. Oh, I lost your visual. Are you there? Uh-oh. I think there's some people online here today. I see some friends there in the chat, but we've lost Patti. I'm going to just keep talking. So anyway, there was a place where in that moment, then I tried to take it back and said, I think he misunderstood me. And I just wanted to process what was happening. And he really pathologized me, like, that's impossible for you to change your feelings that fast. This is your fears of intimacy. And I literally felt a ball of energy leave my belly and go into his. And again, that visceral experience of loss of empowerment. And it wouldn't be until 3 years later, when I told him I wasn't in love with him anymore, and I don't know if I ever was, that I literally felt that ball come back into my belly. So this piece about our somatic healing, about connecting not just with our intelligence here, but our hearts and our bellies, is just really important. I think she's coming back on. Important for our healing journey, for empowerment of our clients. And I think historically in the field of therapy, there hasn't been a lot of awareness of that. You know, the mind was looked at, but not the body mind. So Patti, are you coming back? So I see other people on the call, and I can't tell if that's chat people or if it's just people present. But anyway, Patti did say that she was a little worried about the technology today. So I'm just going to keep talking. So anyway, I am, this was my life's journey, in a sense, to give birth to this baby, or this book as a baby, to share this story, not just for me, but for everyone who has suffered underworld journeys, where they got lost in the dark and they've given up hope. And I hope my message is to trauma survivors to never give up, just to keep finding outlets to be heard, to work through emotions, to reclaim your bodies. And I really feel like we're at the dawning of a new age, where there's really a shift from, there's my husband. Hi, Chris. Just got on. Yeah, and Patty's not here, so I'm just talking. Anyway, let's see. Let's see. Make the connection to the healing of shame. How did you overcome and embody your authentic power? Okay, so that was a question that came. How did I embody? Well, first of all, art was a huge piece. I'm now an art therapist. I started out my training as a psychologist, but when I wound up in the hospital, these images started pouring from my soul that led me back to myself. And it included getting many monsters out and shards of violation, and just honestly letting these images speak through me. And it was so captivating. It gave me so much hope that there was still a part of me that was present there, that was speaking, that could help guide me back. And so it was riveting, and it gave me hope. And again, it wasn't about words, and it wasn't about being reliant on a therapist guiding me. It was me guiding me through my images. And I had some good therapists along the way. I don't mean to say that, but trusting therapists after this was really challenging for me. So, and then, I'm a singer. So I started, after I got out of the hospital, I started singing in Baltimore, and I would get up there on stage and just like be terrified, but I'm like, I'm going to sing. So I was singing and creating. And then writing the story has been, just really powerful for me. I wept as I wrote the story, just wept for that young maiden and how much she had taken on, how much. And like, when I go back now and I look, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like ridiculous. He is so clearly going for a relationship with me far before I really realized it. And I know that now because I'm like, oh my gosh, what shape he must have been in to ever look at a client, especially a client 30 years younger, but any client, as somebody to date. Like, that's just like, he was in such a distorted, perverse in many ways mindset, and he should not have been practicing after this happened. He did do it again with another client, which made me get busy. But anyway, let's see. Let me see questions. So, healing shame. How did you overcome and embody your authentic power? And again, the art, the music. I married a wonderful man who's online here now, and began to trust him. He was just a really good soul. He wasn't interested in trying to get power over me. He was interested in being a companion, and that made a huge difference for me too. Finding someone I could trust, and then slowly finding people I could share the story with. I mean, is so intense in the beginning, and I was so all over the place. I must have looked kind of Looney Tunes, and people might have been like, "Whoa," because the story was so big. But that's what happens when you're traumatized, right? You're dysregulated. Let's see. How difficult was it to finally make the connection and then the break? The break from him? Is that what you mean? Um, is that what you mean, Blaine? Hi, Blaine. Wow. It was really once I wound up in a hospital. So I broke it off with him, but sadly, I was in this doctoral program and I was studying all this intense material around becoming a therapist. And I just felt so out of kilter and had just had such a bizarre experience. Why would I believe therapy would work? So I just felt like there was just no hope. And it came over me very suddenly. But when I wound up in the hospital, the treatment team said, "We feel that you need to take action against this guy. If you're going to get well, you need to take action. And if you don't take action, we will. He's dangerous. He needs to not be practicing." So they actually gave me the name of the attorney, which was really a gift, because if I hadn't had that avenue laid out before me, I don't know that I ever would have done the research. It's so hard to bring someone to court that you have cared about so deeply, and you had this story around. And in Maryland, it was not a crime. In other states, about 50%, it's actually a crime. It's sexual assault. And that's a tricky thing too, because then the person who's coming forward to report this twisted relationship that at one point had met someone's needs, that the doctor might go to jail. So to have that on your shoulders, it's just a very complex thing. So, but anyway, it was between doing art and me seeing that I had been violated. I wasn't just crazy. I had actually been violated. That was a wake up. And then really having people outside of me say, this was the opposite of healing. He broke every rule in the book. The 2,500-year-old Hippocratic Oath is do no harm. And so the programming and the mind effing and the gaslighting that had gone on for 3.5 years started to lose its power over me. And I couldn't deny that I was there because of what he had done, not because I was hopelessly ill. So I hope that explains. Let's see. Talk about Shepard Pratt, staff that encourage you to report. Oh, I just did that. Yep. Yeah. And then I just feel sort of in fact, I'm in the process of making some notes for a second book to look at how trauma and recovering from trauma can be an initiation into a higher state of consciousness. So much of our conditioning in our culture disrupts us from our authentic power. The outdated child rearing practices that don't acknowledge the internal world of the child, the institutions that slowly dehumanize people, the religions that usurp power and get people thinking that they need to go to someone outside of them for the wisdom. All of those things really disrupt a person's just genuine power in beingness. So what I've seen, if people really are willing to work the journey, is that you get connected to your body and the intelligence of your body. You let yourself express from these places inside of you that's not just in your mind, that's on a deep soul level. And in doing that, you connect with how amazing we as human beings are. So fortunately, we're at a great time when there's a lot more hope for people. So much is on the horizons for people healing from trauma and just reclaiming themselves. as the powerful beings that we are. And our world needs that desperately. Let me see if there's any other questions here. Du- 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 du. Anyway, any other questions? This is so funny just to be talking to a chat bar. I'm excited. I'm 61 now. This happened when I was 21, and I am speaking this story not just for myself, although, I found my voice through the vehicle of my own story, but it's really about empowering people to come forward and then shake off the shame, experience connection and genuine empathy so they can come back to themselves. And, we're just seeing that what's happening in our culture, it's a great time for that. I mean, even just COVID and what that has